I found my son living in his car outside my apartment. For 5 years, I believed he was a thief who stole my life savings and abandoned his family. Now here he was, malnourished, freezing, covered in a threadbare blanket. When our eyes met, he didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. "Go home, Mom," he whispered. "It's not safe for you." Then I learned the truth about what he'd sacrificed to protect me. Please drop your name and where you are watching from in the comments below, because subscribers sometimes appear as characters in my stories. My name is Constance, but everyone calls me Connie, and I am 72 years old. I was a high school history teacher for over 30 years, and I valued integrity, order, and the belief that hard work would always be rewarded. 5 years ago, I believed my son Douglas had shattered all of that he had thrown away everything I taught him. He had vanished without warning, leaving behind only a brief, cold note and the staggering loss of my life savings, nearly $80,000 gone from my account. The narrative I clung to, the story I was told by his ex-wife Vanessa, was that Doug had stolen my retirement money to fuel a gambling addiction, that he had abandoned his own daughter, my only grandchild, to run off with some younger woman he met online. He was a selfish, ungrateful thief who had broken my heart and destroyed our family. Or so I believed. And there he was, 5 years later, living in a beat-up sedan with duct tape holding the passenger window together, freezing just outside my apartment complex. "Doug," I said, and my voice came out as a dry whisper that felt alien in my throat. "Is that you? Is that really you?" He recoiled as if I'd struck him, pulling the stained blanket higher around his thin shoulders. "Go home, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse and broken. "Just go inside and pretend you didn't see me, please." The shame in his eyes was unbearable, but something about his posture, the way he kept glancing nervously toward the main entrance of my building, felt wrong. He wasn't acting like a man hiding from shame or guilt. He was acting like a man standing guard, like someone on a mission. "Tell me why you are living like this," he demanded. And my old teacher's voice came back, the one that could silence a rowdy classroom with a single word. "You disappeared for 5 years. You took my money. And now I find you here like this?" He pressed his lips together, his eyes darting around the parking lot as if searching for someone watching us. "I told you 5 years ago," he said, his voice barely audible. "I lost it all. I gambled it away. I am nothing now. Just go inside, Mom, please." But I didn't go. I couldn't move, because something in his eyes told me there was more to this story than the lies I'd been fed. "You've been living in this car," I said, and it wasn't a question. "For how long?" "Doesn't matter," he said, and his hand gripped the car door frame so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You shouldn't be here talking to me. It's not safe." "Not safe," I repeated, and anger began to cut through my shock. "Not safe for who, Douglas?" His eyes filled with tears, and he turned away from me, his shoulders shaking. "For you, Mom," he whispered. "It was never safe for you. That's why I had to leave. That's why I had to become the villain." I didn't understand what he was saying, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty in that moment. My son was not a thief, he was not a coward, and he was not going to spend another night in this freezing car while I had answers to find. "You're coming inside right now," I said, and my voice left no room for argument. "We're going to get you warm, get yoofed, and then you're going to tell me everything." "Mom, if they see me with you," he started, but I cut him off. "Who are they, Douglas?" I asked, and my voice was steel now. "Who are the people you're so afraid of?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something break behind his eyes, some wall he'd been holding up for 5 long years. "The people who wanted to take you away," he said finally. "The people who had the papers ready to lock you up and steal everything you ever worked for." I forced him into my apartment, half supporting his weight because he was so weak he could barely walk. Once inside, I sat him down on my couch and called an ambulance, ignoring his protests. He was severely dehydrated, the paramedics told me, showing signs of malnutrition and early stages of hypothermia. At the hospital, after they hooked him up to an IV and got fluids running into his system, I sat by his bed and refused to leave. The nurses tried to send me home. Visiting hours were over. But I gave them the same look I used to give students who tried to leave class early. They let me stay. When Doug finally woke, several hours later, he looked at me with an exhaustion that went far deeper than physical hunger or cold. "I did this so you wouldn't have to carry it," he murmured, his voice still weak. "I did this so they couldn't touch you." "Carry what, Doug?" I asked, leaning closer. "The shame? The judgment of people who don't know the truth?" He shook his head slowly, and a single tear traced a path down through his overgrown beard. "To save you from the darkness," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "To save you from the institution, from the place where they were going to lock you away and drug you until you forgot your own name." His confession, whispered over the steady beep of the heart monitor, felt like thunder in my chest. Doug had not stolen my money to fuel some imaginary gambling addiction or run away with a fantasy woman. He had done it to stop his ex-wife, Vanessa, and her new husband, Brad, a man who called himself an elder care attorney, from institutionalizing me. Brad was setting up a legal maneuver, Doug explained, his words coming faster now as if a dam had broken. "They were going to declare you mentally unfit," he said. "They had a diagnosis ready, written by a psychiatrist you never met, claiming you had early onset dementia and diminished capacity." The goal was something called a conservatorship, where Brad would be appointed as your legal guardian. Once that happened, he would have total control over everything. Your apartment, your pension, your freedom, everything. I felt the blood drain from my face, he continued. "They had the papers ready, Mom," he said, his eyes wide with remembered terror. "Brad told me himself, he's connected to a whole network. Doctors who write fake diagnoses, judges who rubber stamp the petitions, lawyers who know how to work the system. They gave me two choices," he said, and his hand found mine, gripping it with desperate strength. "Either I take the blame for stealing your money, hand over all the assets to Vanessa for safekeeping, and disappear completely, or they would file the conservatorship petition and have you forcibly removed within 48 hours. They told me the name of the place," Doug continued, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Riverside Manor, a terrible, isolated facility on the edge of the county where patients are heavily medicated and families rarely visit. You would never see the sun again, Mom. Never walk freely. Never make your own choices." Brad said they would keep you comfortable, which meant drugged into submission until you couldn't remember who you were anymore. His voice broke completely then, and tears streamed down his face. "I signed everything," he said. "I gave up the money, gave up the house, even gave up custody of my daughter, because Vanessa said if I fought for Emma, she would proceed with the conservatorship anyway. I made myself the villain, the thief, the deadbeat father, all of it, so you could stay free." "The car," he said, gesturing weakly toward the window. "That car has been my home for 5 years, parked in different spots around your building, moving every few days so no one would notice. I've been watching, Mom, watching your apartment, every single night, ready to warn you if they came, ready to do whatever it took to keep you safe." My heart didn't break in that moment. It transformed into something harder, something forged in fury. My anger wasn't directed at my son, the man who had sacrificed everything to protect me. It was directed at the sheer, calculated cruelty of Vanessa and Brad, at the evil masquerading as legal authority and care. I told Doug to rest, to let the hospital take care of him, and that I was going to handle this. He tried to protest, but I silenced him with a look. "You've carried this alone for 5 years, I said firmly. Now it's my turn to fight." Doug, still weak but with a spark of hope in his eyes, told me about the hidden compartment in his car. The next morning, after the doctors cleared him to leave the ICU, we went back to the parking lot together. He showed me how to access a space beneath the trunk's false bottom, and inside was a weatherproof folder containing the proof of the conspiracy. My hands shook as I opened it and saw the terrible evidence of what had almost happened to me. There was a fabricated dementia diagnosis on official letterhead from Dr. Martin Holloway, psychiatrist, dated from 5 years ago. The document claimed I was suffering from progressive dementia, that I was a danger to myself, and recommended immediate placement in a 24-hour supervised care facility. I had never met Dr. Holloway in my life, never been evaluated by any psychiatrist, yet here was an official document claiming otherwise. Next was a draft of a conservatorship petition, filled out in Brad's handwriting with notes in the margins. One note read, "Judge Harlow, Thursday, 2 p.m., done deal." And another said, "Subject unable to manage finances, recommend immediate asset freeze." The proposed guardian was listed as Brad Everson, and the designated facility was Riverside Manor. Finally, there was a handwritten list of names, judges, doctors, and lawyers, all connected by lines and notes indicating payments. At the bottom, in Brad's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Network fee, $5,000 per case." This wasn't just a family dispute or a misunderstanding. This was organized crime operating under the cover of elder care law. My first call was to Laura Chen, one of my former students who now worked as a senior investigator for the state attorney's office. I hadn't spoken to Laura in 15 years, but when I called her office and explained who I was, she agreed to meet me immediately. Laura's office was in a government building downtown, in the Elder Abuse Unit, a division I hadn't even known existed. "Mrs. Sterling," she said when I walked in, and her face lit up with genuine warmth. "It's been so long. I never thought I'd see you again." We sat down in her small, cluttered office, and I spread the documents across her desk. As Laura read through them, her expression changed from curiosity to shock to something close to horror. "Mrs. Sterling," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "this isn't just Brad Everson. This is a network, an entire system designed to prey on vulnerable seniors." "How big is this network?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Laura leaned back in her chair, her face grim. "Predatory guardianship is a billion-dollar industry in the United States," she said. "They target isolated seniors, fabricate diagnoses of incompetence, get a judge to sign off on a conservatorship, and then drain the person's entire estate through legal fees and facility costs." "$1 billion?" I repeated, unable to process the scale. Laura nodded. "And most victims never fight back, because by the time they realize what's happening, they've been declared legally incompetent and stripped of their rights." "Can we prosecute?" I asked, and my voice was steady despite the rage building in my chest. Laura hesitated. "We need more than these documents," she said. "This is strong, circumstantial evidence, but we need something definitive, something that proves Brad's intent and his network's operation. We need a smoking gun." "Doug has audio recordings," I said, remembering what my son had told me. He recorded conversations from his car, conversations between Brad and Vanessa when they came to check on my apartment. Laura leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Of Brad? Saying what?" "Saying things that would destroy him," I replied. "Then we have our smoking gun," Laura said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw apathy to justice. "But Mrs. Sterling," she continued, her voice serious, "if we move on this, they will come after you hard. Brad has powerful connections, and he won't go down quietly." "Let them come," I said, and I meant every word. I've faced down rowdy teenagers for 30 years. I think I can handle one corrupt lawyer. 3 days later, Brad and Vanessa showed up at the hospital where Doug was still recovering. They arrived together, Vanessa carrying an enormous floral arrangement and wearing a perfectly coordinated outfit that screamed Instagram influencer. Brad was in an expensive suit, his smile practiced and predatory. "Doug," Vanessa said as she walked into the room, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh my God, you look terrible. Why didn't you call us? We would have helped." Doug said nothing, just turned his face away, and I saw Vanessa's smile falter for just a moment before she recovered. "Connie," Brad said, turning his attention to me with that smooth, practiced charm. "I'm so glad Doug finally reached out. We've been worried sick about him for years." "Have you?" I asked, and my voice was ice. "Yes, of course," Brad said, moving closer. "Doug is family, and family takes care of each other. Connie, Doug is clearly unstable. He needs professional psychiatric help, not just medical treatment." "He needs help?" I repeated. And I saw Brad's eyes narrow slightly. "Where were you 5 years ago when he needed help?" "We tried to help," Brad said smoothly. "But Doug refused. He ran away before we could intervene properly." "He ran because you threatened him," I said, and the room went very quiet. Brad's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Threatened him?" "Connie, that's paranoid thinking," he said, and his tone was perfectly calibrated to sound concerned rather than defensive. "Is it paranoid to know about a fabricated dementia diagnosis with your colleague's signature on it?" I asked, watching his face carefully. "I don't know what you're talking about," Brad said, but his smile had frozen now, no longer reaching his eyes. "Dr. Martin Holloway," I continued, "the conservatorship petition you drafted, Judge Harlow's name in the margins, your network's fee schedule." Brad's face went very still, and I saw Vanessa look at him with confusion. "Connie," Brad said, and his voice had changed now, dropped the pretense of warmth. "Be very careful with accusations like that. They could be considered defamatory." "Then sue me," I said, standing up. "I have 5 years of evidence, and I have people who know how to use it." Vanessa grabbed Brad's arm. "Brad, maybe we should go," she said nervously. "Yes, maybe you should," I agreed. "And don't come back." Brad looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something dangerous in his expression. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The only mistake I made," I replied, "was trusting you with my son's family. Now get out." After they left, Doug looked at me with something like awe. "Mom, you just declared war on them," he said. "No," I corrected him. "They declared war on us 5 years ago. I'm just finally fighting back." Laura advised me that confronting Brad publicly would force his hand and potentially expose more of his network. So the next day, I walked into Brad's downtown office unannounced. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I simply told her to inform Mr. Everson that Constance Sterling was here to discuss his elder care nonprofit. Brad came out within minutes, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "Connie, you're trespassing," he said. "I'm a potential client," I replied calmly. "I understand you help seniors with their legal affairs?" "I don't have time for this," Brad said, but he gestured for me to follow him into his private office. The office was expensively decorated, all mahogany and leather, diplomas and awards covering the walls. "What do you want?" Brad asked once the door was closed. "I want to understand how you live with yourself," I said. "How you can build a career on stealing from the elderly and call it care." Brad's expression hardened. "Those are serious accusations, and I could have you arrested for harassment." "You could," I agreed. "But then I'd have to explain to the police why I'm here, and I'd have to show them the evidence I've collected." "What evidence?" Brad asked, but I could see the sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "The fabricated diagnosis, the conservatorship petition with Judge Harlow's name, your fee schedule, all of it," I said. "You have nothing that would hold up in court," Brad said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "I also have recordings," I said, watching him carefully. "Recordings of you and Vanessa discussing how you wished the old fools would just drop dead already so you could save a fortune in paperwork." Brad's face went white, then red with rage. "Get out of my office," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm leaving," I said, standing up. "But I'll see you in court, Mr. Everson, and when I do, the whole world will know exactly what you are. That night, Doug gave me the audio file he'd recorded months ago from his car. Laura, Doug, and I listened to it together in Laura's office, and what we heard was devastating. The recording was from a night when Brad and Vanessa had parked near my apartment building, apparently checking to see if Doug was still keeping watch. "Is he still here?" Brad's voice came through clearly, annoyed and impatient. "He's watching her apartment every night," Vanessa replied. "For what?" "She's completely clueless," Brad said, and there was contempt dripping from every word. "Should we just proceed with the petition anyway?" Vanessa asked. "No, if he's here, he might warn her. We need to wait him out," Brad replied. Then there was a pause, and Brad laughed. A cold, cruel sound. "These old fools drop dead eventually anyway," he said. "We'll save a fortune in paperwork if we just wait." Laura stopped the recording, and we sat in silence for a moment. "This is it," Laura said finally. "This is proof of intent, proof of conspiracy, proof of everything we need. But how do we use it?" I asked. Laura smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "We destroy him publicly first," she said. "Then we destroy him legally." The opportunity came 2 weeks later at Vanessa's annual Senior Care Charity Gala, a lavish event she hosted every year to raise money for her various causes. Laura's technical team had been monitoring Vanessa's social media, and we knew the gala would be live-streamed to hundreds of followers. The event was held at an expensive downtown hotel. 200 guests in formal attire, champagne flowing freely. Vanessa was in her element, wearing a silk gown and working the room like the social media influencer she aspired to be. I attended as a regular guest, having purchased a ticket under a different name through one of Laura's colleagues. Halfway through the evening, Vanessa took the stage to give her annual speech about the importance of caring for vulnerable seniors. "Tonight we celebrate the power of giving," she said into the microphone, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We celebrate those who dedicate their lives to helping those who can no longer help themselves." The projection screen behind her was supposed to display a slideshow of smiling seniors from her nonprofit's promotional materials. Instead, thanks to Laura's technical team, the screen flickered and changed. The image that appeared was grainy but clear. A filthy bedroom in Riverside Manor, an elderly man laying in a stained bed, clearly neglected and alone. Then text began to scroll across the screen. "This is where Brad Everson's network places the elderly after stealing their assets. This is the reality of predatory guardianship." The room erupted in confused murmurs, and Vanessa turned to look at the screen, her face going pale. The image changed again, this time showing Brad and Vanessa's names next to copies of the fabricated diagnosis and the conservatorship petition. Then the audio began to play, Brad's voice clear and unmistakable. "These old fools drop dead eventually anyway," his recorded voice said. "We'll save a fortune in paperwork if we just wait." The room exploded into chaos, people pulling out their phones, recording everything, shouting questions. Vanessa stood frozen on the stage, her perfect mask shattered, and Brad was frantically trying to get to the technical booth. I stood up from my table and walked calmly to the stage, taking the microphone from Vanessa's numb hands. "My name is Constance Sterling," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. "I am the old fool Brad Everson tried to institutionalize 5 years ago so he could steal my life savings. My son sacrificed everything to save me, and tonight, we're exposing the truth." The room fell silent. Every phone pointed at me, every eye watching. I told them about the fabricated diagnosis, about Doug's 5 years living in his car, about the network of corrupt professionals who made their fortunes robbing the elderly. When I finished speaking, the applause started slowly, then built into something like thunder. Brad and Vanessa left through a side exit, but the damage was done. Their reputations destroyed on live social media feeds watched by thousands. The legal battle came next, in an Adult Protective Services hearing where Brad attempted to salvage his case. He arrived confident, presenting his fabricated diagnosis and his petition to have me declared incompetent. Then it was my turn to take the stand. I was dressed simply, the opposite of Vanessa's glamour, and my demeanor was calm and professional. My attorney, working with Laura's office, played the audio recording of Brad's callous dismissal of the elderly. The judge's face went rigid as he listened. Then I presented the evidence, piece by piece. The timeline of Doug's disappearance, the forged diagnosis from a doctor I'd never met, the list of names in Brad's handwriting. "Your Honor," I said, looking directly at the judge, "I am not suffering from dementia or any cognitive decline. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in history. I taught high school for 30 years and managed my own finances successfully throughout my life. I am not suffering from mental illness. I am suffering from an organized criminal attack designed to house the very system meant to protect me, to destroy me instead." The courtroom erupted and the judge had to call for order. The fallout was swift and absolute. Brad was served with a massive civil suit filed by multiple former victims who came forward after seeing the gala exposure. A criminal investigation was launched by Laura's department into the entire guardianship network. Judge Harlow and Dr. Holloway both faced professional misconduct charges. Vanessa, abandoned by her high society friends and facing her own legal troubles, filed for divorce from Brad and was forced to return assets she'd fraudulently acquired. Doug was formally exonerated, the stigma of thief and deadbeat erased from his record. The story of his sacrifice became public, and instead of shame, he was recognized as a hero. With Laura's help and the recovered assets, Doug slowly rebuilt his life. He returned to accounting, focusing specifically on helping elderly clients protect their finances from predatory practices. 1 year after that terrible night in the hospital parking lot, I stood at a podium in a newly renovated office building. The sign outside read, "Sterling Elder Care Protection," a nonprofit organization funded entirely by the assets we'd recovered from Brad's network. Doug stood beside me, healthy now, clean-shaven and wearing a suit, his eyes clear and bright. Around us were 50 people, former victims of predatory guardianship, attorneys, journalists, and advocates. "This organization," I said to the gathered crowd, "is not built on my money or my pride. It is built on the quiet, lonely courage of one man who chose to become a villain for 5 years so his mother could remain free." I turned to Doug and we embraced, not in tearful relief, but in mutual adult respect. Then I turned back to the crowd and gestured to the plaque on the wall. It listed the founders' names, followed by our mission statement in bold letters. "To ensure that no one is ever silenced, isolated, or legally robbed in the name of care again." The applause was warm and genuine, not the polite charity gala applause of Vanessa's world, but the sound of people who understood what this fight had cost. After the ceremony, Doug and I stood alone in the new office, looking out the window at the city. "Mom, you didn't have to name it after us," Doug said quietly. "I named it after the truth," I replied. "You were never a thief. You were never a coward. You were a hero who made an impossible choice." "I just did what any son would do," Doug said. "No," I corrected him gently. "You did what only the bravest would do. And now we make sure no one else has to make that choice." We stood together in comfortable silence, two survivors of a system designed to destroy us, now dedicated to protecting others from the same fate. What would you have done in Doug's situation? Would you have chosen to take the blame and endure years of isolation to protect someone you loved? Or would you have risked fighting the system immediately, even knowing the odds were against you? What does Doug's 5 years of silent sacrifice teach us about the true nature of love and protection? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more real accounts of justice and survival. Thank you for spending your time with me today.